Thank you for joining XROM, which is India's first AR/VR focused podcast. And today I'm honored to have with me Mr. Bruno Kocher, who's the former CTO of Hitachi Vantara, CEO and founder at the Swiss Data Labs AG, and currently he's the CEO and co-founder at Sekai, a Web3 powered industrial metaverse that creates a global digital twin of physical assets, process, and system that is used by enterprises. So, Bruno, really appreciate you taking time and being part of a humble podcast. Why don't we start with a brief background and what you've been doing?
And thank you for the invitation. So actually my background is from mechanical engineering. And I started developing software very early on with robotics, visual systems for robotics. And then I was actually working in my previous role with Hitachi as CTO and Chief Digital Officer for various enterprise customers. And also now I was joining then Sekai as CEO and co-founder in order to build the Metaverse, or the industrial Metaverse, how it is called. Previous, it was more called like digital twins, but now as the evolution goes on and the market goes on, I think the Metaverse is the right name for it, because actually it has to scale beyond the limitations of a digital twin, how we define it, right?
If you had to describe what the Metaverse is or explain what Metaverse were, what would you have to say?
I don't think there is a common Metaverse definition or a common reference architecture model. I think the Metaverse, for how Sekai is sort of putting it towards the community and the market, we typically have 4 layers, right? How we define it. There is the consumption layer, VR, AR, web front ends, mobile devices. So this is sort of consuming the Metaverse information and data. Then we actually define the data interoperability layer, where you share information, share data meaning. Then you have obviously the entire marketplace community. This is typically governed by blockchain technology, by Web3 technology, in order to have NFTs in place, to have DAOs in place, to have smart contracts in place, but as well having concepts, as we say, build to earn, share to earn, in order to build applications in VR and earn money for it, or in order to share data in the Metaverse and earn money for it. And then the basic foundation layers, what I mentioned, is sort of this connection to the real world, having identity layer, having mass notarization layer, having trust of origin layer, because you need to know in the industrial Metaverse, is this asset real, and is the identity of this asset which I'm expecting in virtual reality or in web front end.
Would you be able to explain digital twin, or what you call the industrial metaverse?
Yeah, so the digital twin actually is sort of the foundational concept of the industrial metaverse. So if you have a digital twin, let's say for an asset, and you put it in the world at its real location, because every digital twin actually has a real world location, and you start connecting data to that digital twin and federate it with other digital twin and start building up and weaving in, you actually end up in a mesh of data and in a mesh of digital twins, where you actually then can expose towards the consumption layer, right? So you can expose it to virtual reality. You can enter, for example, a complex asset within virtual reality and get this immersive experience. On the other hand, you might have a digital twin of an infrastructure, such as a railway. There you do not need to have virtual reality per se to have this experience. You can have it on a Google Map Earth-like visual user interface in order to have the value, right? So the industrial metaverse or the digital twins, they are not tied to a representation layer, right? So they can be processes, they can be simple assets, complex assets. There can be entire organizations in a digital twin in the industrial metaverse, which actually being linked together over the limitations of current organizations, but as well over the limitations of current industry verticals.
Would you be able to elaborate on this digital twin a little bit more by giving some examples?
Yeah, so what we have, for example, as a customer cases are heavily complex rotational equipment, such as, for example, a gas turbine or a jet engine, right? Where you then have several thousands of parts, and you start actually dive into those parts by virtual reality. So you actually turn on your goggles and take your handles, and then you can start interacting with that digital twin in a very immersive way. So you can actually take the turbine several parts away, you can explode it. And what the use cases in virtual reality are, some very prominent use cases, for example, is training and knowledge sharing, so that you actually have this multiplayer experience, which you have in a metaverse. So you have maybe one senior engineer teaching 4 students or junior engineers how to interact such a large complex asset. For example, how to shut it down, or how to turn it on, or how to maintain if something is breaking, or how to maintain on a regular maintenance basis. So actually, the use cases in collaborating are very broad. And this, I think, is as well the aspect of immersive experience, which will not only change in the social media and retail business of a metaverse, it as well will heavily change the way organizations will collaborate, right? So they can now join a virtual reality at the same time, at the same space, and see the same things, right? And this is a completely fundamental change, because before having virtual reality capabilities, you had to go to the shop floor, or you had to go to the physical location, walk around the physical asset and look at the physical asset. Now you have the capabilities with virtual reality or other immersive experience to join virtually the digital world, which represents a picture of the reality, having sensor data, having surrounding data, having the right spot, having the right environment temperature, humidity, and so on. So you are really in the digital world of that specific asset or of that specific site, if it's a more complex.
We're making life extremely simpler for enterprise. Instead of us going all the way to a factory, somebody could train and understand right at the comfort of home. We would also be sensorizing the physical world, taking data from it and adding real-time data, and learning from the virtual world and leveraging the learning onto the physical world. So this is the future. So I will appreciate, Bruno, if you could elaborate further on what you're building with Sekai, and maybe share examples of some of the works that you've done, so enterprise or the listeners can understand.
So what we are building with Sekai is in what I mentioned. So the industrial metaverse, or the metaverse, is dealing with physical real world data. There is a major challenge in having the connection between the data world and the virtual reality. Right? This is sort of where Sekai actually was founded back in 2019, in order to build this layer of the data, what we call system of records, right? Whether this is a sensor data, but it as well can be a drawing, a 3D drawing of an asset. It as well can be what I mentioned, infrastructure such as train tracks. And in order to bring those data together, we actually developed a very innovative technology, how you can bring those together. We call that pattern-based semantic data mesh, where you actually can weave in those data together and represent them in virtual reality, but as well in WebGL to the consumption layer or the immersive experience layer. So what we have started back in 2019 was oil and gas use cases, mainly around platforms, right? Oil rigs and platforms. There was as well several use cases on subsea level in order to avoid much diving into submarine for the divers. And as well, we are actually building a lot of use cases around what we call the community edition for the metaverse, or what we call national digital twins, which are based on public and open data, right? So that those builders, those data engineers can take public data, can take open data, bring them together and actually build use cases on top of Sekai's metaverse, and actually as well can build virtual realities using Unreal, Unity, or Omniverse capabilities. So Sekai is actually building the foundation and the data layer, as well as the connection towards the real world data and the gaming engines for the industrial meta.
In your profile, it says the Sekai is a Web3 powered industrial metaverse.
Exactly.
So maybe, kind of elaborate on that. But before I think you get into that, I think it'll be nice of you if you could explain Web3 itself, what Web3 is, and then maybe talk about how Web3, Sekai is a Web3 powered industrial metaverse.
Yeah, so Web3 or the follower of Web2 actually is heavily driven by this concept of autonomy and distributed computing, right? So that you have autonomous layer and that everyone can actually participate and everything is transparent. So blockchain technology is one of the main drivers behind Web3 technologies and Web3 sort of how to collaborate, right? So, and what we embrace actually at Sekai is Web3 technologies in order to publish data, in order to publish use cases, to make them accessible via marketplaces, which are actually governed by Web3 and blockchain technologies. As well, the concept of distributed autonomous organization, I think, will be heavily driven as well from the community using the metaverse and actually building those use cases, right? So that people no longer working in the future just for one enterprise. They might work in the morning for an enterprise, but in the afternoon, they might work in the metaverse and building use cases on top of the metaverse, publish it on the Web3 marketplace, minting their NFTs for digital twins and having their digital ownerships published to the users of the metaverse, getting subscription for it, and actually then can earn money on top of that metaverse. So similarly, you building your sneaker and selling it as NFT in the Web3 governed metaverse for social media and retail. You would build a digital twin, for example, of a wind farm and actually publish it to the community and get subscription fees in relation to that use case, which can be used from governments or which can be used from utility companies, for example.
Right. You mentioned about distributed autonomous organizations. So, would you like to explain about that? Explain a little bit about that, because there is a decentralized autonomous organization. What is a distributed autonomous organization? Address that, and maybe you could also talk about Web3 and decentralization. Are organizations or enterprise even ready for the ethos of decentralization? Because when you talk about decentralization, you talk about a top bottom bottom to up of functioning rather than the top down hierarchical manner. So are organizations even ready for decentralization, and what is a distributed autonomous organization?
Yeah, I think I need to take it a little bit from what I think organizations from a working or contributing aspect from distributed organizations, they are not ready. And I think a lot of people working for those organizations are actually not ready. But the technology behind it, so blockchain, ledger technologies, I think as well corporates will sort of embrace those technology, because the technology itself is a technology which enables a lot of things, right? Even inside a corporate structure. So having transparency of your assets and identity of your assets in a immutable ledger system is sort of a good technology feature, right? You can use not only in the public, but you can as well use it in a corporate boundaries. When it comes to distributed autonomous organization, I think we are very, very, very early on, right? So having an organization which is owned by the tokens holder of that distributed autonomous organization and can be voted in a very democratic way and very direct, and all the contracts are actually stored on blockchain. I think here we need some more time. I think the younger people or communities driven, I think, by students, are driven by people which actually embrace this way of working and contributing, maybe not to one DAO in the future, but maybe contributing towards 5-6 DAO as an employee and not being employed by a specific company, or maybe even work for the DAO of a specific company. This will take some time, right? But I think the technology and the way of contributing to use cases, but as well the way of contributing to solve problems, makes it much more attractive if you put that on a DAO rather than a corporate, right? Because in a DAO, everyone can contribute. I can contribute from South Africa. I can contribute from, I don't know, from North America or from APAC. I don't need to be part of that corporate structure. I can contribute to a problem in the industrial metaverse, wherever it is, greenhouse gas reduction use cases or energy saving use cases. I can contribute without being employed, without being hired, without being sort of part of a specific organization. I think this will completely, fundamentally change how people work in the future. If it will be called DAO as it is called today, if it's technically implemented the way DAOs are currently implemented with all the token holders and all the smart contracts, we will see, and there will be definitely an evolution, but I think it will be, I'm very confident that it will change the way people work together in the future heavily, right? Same with immersive experience, right? So the way immersive experience will change the collaboration, how we collaborate together in a digital world to solve real world problems and simulate real world problems. It's not only just seeing data connected in virtual reality, it's as well simulate what if scenarios together at the same location from a digital point of perspective, but from a physical point of perspective, you do not need to be there, right? You have a digital access towards real world information, corporate information, public information at one fingertip, right? And you can sort of really start exploring and solving problems which you were not able because you were sort of tied to your corporate structure. If you do not have this specialist hired, you don't have access. But if you expose your problem as a corporate to the industrial metaverse, you might get it solved by someone who is not part of your organization.
It's so exciting that, we are no longer, you know, taking these minor iterations, because I think, so far all of our organizations, whether it's the banking industry, whether it's the education, whether it's a businesses, I think they are legacy traditional businesses which started maybe 100 2 years back, but they still follow the same model. When we live in the 21st century, when our demands are different, the market is different. So yes, I think we, instead of these minor iteration, we need to completely reinvent the wheel and look at this new future with the new ethos. When we talk about decentralized autonomous organizations, it sounds very fantastic, but I don't even understand whether organizations are ready to let go of their hierarchical functions, because like I mentioned, almost all businesses, government, banking, everything works in a hierarchical centralized manner. And here we are saying that Web3, the ethos behind is decentralization. So DAOs, I mean, if it happens where the community gets the power, enterprise can solve problem from, like you mentioned, people could be sitting in maybe Africa. The people could be sitting in India. People could be sitting in any part of those neglected part of the world. Because I think the neglected part of the world will have a voice if we kind of understand technology, because I think now we all have a chance to build a preferred future. You didn't address whether organizations are ready for decentralization, because besides being ready for decentralization, there's obviously, when we talk about blockchain, Web3, it says that it'll create a transparent world. It'll take the intermediaries out. Now, almost all of the businesses, whether it's Facebook, whether it's all of the businesses, they are a middleman business, because so when we do you think governments, regulation, and these traditional businesses will allow these kind of things to exist, like decentralized organizations, DeFi, DAOs? Will they exist? And maybe you can talk about whether organizations are ready for decentralization.
I think they will not need to allow it. I think the community will make it so attractive for corporates to participate in a decentralized community to solve their problems and to solve world's demanding problem, actually. Or I don't think any sort of a corporate can actually solve climate change, right? It's just not possible. Not even a logistic company, even if it's the largest one, the largest corporates can solve those issues, right? It's only the community which actually can solve larger problems. And it even doesn't need to be right saving the world thing, but it's actually very likely that this distributed communities will be very, very successful, already based on public and open data, even without having corporates sharing their data and sharing their intellectual property and their insights. Even with having open data sets and public data sets, having a community working on those data in a joint fashion and in a community fashion, and building use cases and get rewarded for those use cases, right? The metaverse needs to have this build to earn and share to earn concept from a business perspective, that even, you mentioned people in Africa or people in China or people wherever here in Switzerland can actually earn their tokens and earn their money by contributing it, even without being employed by a large corporate. So I think the success and the attractivity of such a metaverse will actually not raise the question if corporates allow or want to share. I think corporates will do it because it will be the only way to solve their problems.
Right. I think we're getting into a world where the Gen Z are asking like really brave out there questions, because everything was hierarchical, and the new bunch of entrepreneurs are looking at businesses and everything in doing a complete reinvent rather than a minor iteration. You spoke about build to earn and share to learn. Would you be able to like maybe elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so I think for the metaverse or the industrial metaverse, or I think it's important to have actually a as well a commercial incentive, right? And it's not just this incentive, but if you work for a DAO instead of working for a corporate, you want to have your sort of money, right? You need to live, you need to buy food, actually. So that's why we took this play to earn from the gaming industry, where you actually play or you build something in a game and get actually paid for playing. We took that concept and said, okay, for the industrial metaverse, what does it need in order to get as well incentivized and getting your work paid, right? So then we said, okay, in order to play to earn, we say, okay, let's build to earn, because you need to build the digital representative of the real world. So we provide real world data. And then builders like data engineers, but as well virtual reality builders, programmers, software engineers can actually take those data, take our APIs and take our SDKs and build content in the industrial metaverse. And if there's value behind the content and behind the application, they get actually paid by subscribers, which subscribe towards an application, towards insights, or towards whatever the builder is actually building, right? And the share to earn is actually if somebody puts data towards the community and puts data into the metaverse and allows access to data into the metaverse or from the metaverse, because then they will as well get rewarded by the subscriber. So it's a very, very simple business model, right? So you have a use case and the subscriber to the use case. For example, you have the trains and you have the public data of all the trains in a country, and somebody calculates an app which predicts punctuality based on the train locations. And then as a user, you want to have the app, right? And say, I need to know if the trains are punctual or not. Then actually you subscribe to that app and you pay whatever, $2.50 a month for that app, right? And out of those $2.50, there's a percentage goes to the builder, and the percentage actually goes to the one who provided the data from the trains, right? And there are other stakeholders like people who validate if the data is correct and validate if the predictions are correct. So there, I think in the white paper, there are about 9 roles which actually get a little percentage out of that subscription from the subscriber. So it's basically very simple.
Yeah, how cool is that? Because I think we are completely reinventing how we'll work. The work of the future is completely changing, and it's really interesting and mind-boggling. What are your views on India as a market opportunity? Because all the while, we have been a nation that's been exporting the best engineers, and that's the reason I think it's plain to see. I mean, the biggest companies in the world have Indian CEOs. We have a big database of Web3 and Metaverse developers. Is Sekai looking at partnering with Indian developers or startups over here, or building solutions for India?
I mean, we actually have developers from India in the team already, so we are spot on there. And I think India is definitely one of the biggest markets for build to earn, but as well from share to earn. But I think builders will be as well, as I mentioned. So the community for builders actually are very educated sort of software programmers or data scientists, whereas the people who actually subscribe are maybe not programmers. They're just ordinary people like me, like you. So I think given the population and as well the level of education in India, I think India is actually a brilliant market for such an industrial metaverse. Definitely.
Right. If these enterprise who are looking at building digital twins, how does one go about it? How expensive it is? Could you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, well, it depends, right? So it depends if it's the first of a kind. This one is a little bit more expensive because you have to actually start getting the informations. Then the second of a kind will be sort of less expensive. If we are talking about really large assets and large complex assets, they needs to be a funding from the corporate, right? So that's not just having I want to have a digital twin and off we go, and I buy a good graphic card and a good whatever device to enter virtual reality. So it takes time. The most challenging the challenging part of building digital twins for our corporate customers inside our corporate edition is actually getting to data, right? So getting the data from the customer and not just copying data. We always want to avoid copying data because we do this data mesh, as I mentioned. So the most challenging part is actually accessing customers' data, and not from a technical perspective, but have the right data sort of accessed and being able to bring them together. And then building virtual realities is sort of a very, very small step and a small budget point behind building such large complex.
All right. Thank you, Bruno. Really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Wish you and the team at Sekai the very best. I think we are re-looking at how we do businesses, and I think more and more enterprises need to take cognizant of this change and leverage this opportunity of leveraging the community, So exciting space and exciting times. So thank you once again for being part of the podcast. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Bruno. Really appreciate this.
Thank you for having me. Bye. Bye.